Hi there, future of work enthusiast. I'm Yulia, the host of Skills for Mars, and I welcome you to a new episode of the podcast. So get yourself some coffee or tea and tune in to this inspiring conversation. For your information, there are more than 100 videos on various future of work topics, so check out all the playlists and podcast series. If there is a topic you'd like to see discussed and cannot find it here, leave a comment below and I will make sure to invite an expert to share their insights. I would also love to receive your feedback or any question you might have, so thanks to message me below. And finally, the best way to support this podcast is by subscribing to the Skills for Mars channel. I will know this is of value and will continue bringing amazing guests on the show. It is simple, just click on the red button. Enjoy today's talk. Hi Mounir and welcome to Skills for Mars.
Hi, Yulia. Thanks for having me here today.
I've been looking forward to this. I mean, we've scheduled this a month and a half ago or something like this. That's when we first had our first chat on video. And then ever since, I've been thinking about what are we going to talk about. And in the meanwhile, so many conferences and so many space travel events happened.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot has happened in that time, and it feels like it's been a long time ago, doesn't it?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, the only way I can have a grasp of time nowadays, I'm not sure about you, is by how much sports I'm doing, because I don't like doing sports. So every single day counts, right? But otherwise, because days are the same, it just feels like it's very compacted.
Yeah, these are strange times indeed. And I guess we have to adapt and figure things out. So take it one day at a time.
Exactly. But what I'm grateful for these days is so many connections that have happened online, like this one with you and with others as well, that maybe otherwise we would not have had the time or we would have been all traveling and so on. But nowadays they just happen and they're beautiful.
That's a really good point, actually. I think I've met significantly more people this year than I typically do. And I go to conferences all the time, space conferences, mainly to network with passionate people about space. And I think I probably tripled my network this year because of online meetings. So yeah, a very good point.
It's very interesting. It happened the same to me, and then you wouldn't think about it, right? Because everyone is complaining about social media and spending too much time online, that they are not real connections, but it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah, not at all. It's real. I think it's real. we're talking. I think we are getting to build rapport.
So then maybe we can make it even more real and share some space travel insights with everyone listening. But before we do that, would you be okay to introduce yourself and where the passion for space travel comes from?
Sure. So my name is Mounir Alafrangy. I am a mechanical and aerospace engineer. I got my engineering degree from the George Washington University here in Washington, D.C. Got my master's there. And so my curiosity for space started when I was much younger. I think all children get very curious. I think children are scientists in their own way, and they look up to the stars and they try to figure out, what is that? How long is it? How far is it? How big is it? And are there things living there? So that's what initially triggered my interest. But I guess on a personal level, I've been an artist for the majority of my life. I've been painting and doing sculpture for decades now. And I feel like there's a bridge that connects that with my passion for space. I've learned that with the arts, you can collaborate with so many different people that use different art tools in their own way, that specialize in those different things. And I've been collaborating with a lot of artists to build massive paintings and massive sculpture. When everybody's specialized in something and somebody has a vision and you come together to bring that vision to reality, you are amazed with the final results. And I feel like space is very similar to that. You're using different tools, but you've got people that specialize in propulsion, people that specialize in the, with a combustion chamber or the nozzle or the human health support, trajectory optimization. When you bring them all together to fulfill a vision, let's say build a colony on Mars, that becomes doable. That becomes something that works. And so it's interesting that they seem so different. Painting a canvas or building an engine seem very different, but when you break it down, it's really the same.
What kind of paintings do you paint? Are those the ones behind you, or are they more space oriented?
Yeah, those are. I painted those back, I think, in 2011. Those are aerial views, abstract aerial views of Earth, of farms. I think the most recent movement is to integrate a lot of mathematical formula into painting. So to paint math in a way, to paint physics in a way, and obviously space has always had a little part of my art. So yeah, it's a good combination, I feel.
For sure. And then the space figurine, is it something you have sculpted, or is that made by someone else? Yeah, with Zoom now we see in each other's houses. So I saw the space figurine behind you.
The space figurine, which one are you referring to?
There is one next to the book, next to the.
It's an astronaut. Yeah, no, I did not create that one. No, that's I picked that up somewhere. So yeah, you'll see. Space is something that resembles spaces in every corner of my place. Can't get away from it.
No. And for sure, it's something very exciting to think about. I'm just thinking about what Musk is saying every single time, right? But I feel the same way as he does. This is something to unite all of us. Soon we might become a multiplanetary species. Soon we might inhabit another planet. So that's something to dream about. By the way, do you think that it will be possible to have an unmanned crew on Mars in 2024, or is it too early?
Elon Musk seems to think that that is possible. He has, I think, surprised the world in the past, and if that's something that he wants to do, I think most likely he'll be able to. Obviously, the more support he gets, the more some of those ambitious goals come to reality. So I think it's a good plan. Send more robots there, do some of the legwork there before we send humans, because the trip to Mars is going to be very difficult, and we haven't done anything like this before. The ISS is about 400 miles away from Earth. Very close in proximity to being 20 million miles away from Earth in the middle of nowhere. So we want to take all the safety precautions. So I think it's a good plan. But yeah, can you imagine humans living on a different planet even for a month? That's brilliant. We're living in some interesting time indeed.
For sure. Right. Have you seen, by the way, there is a movie called Away on Netflix?
Yes, I binged watched that thing the second it landed. So, yes.
Does it seem like what would happen on a travel to Mars, on a journey to Mars? Because you've been experiencing that a bit in a different way.
Yeah, I actually. Some of the scenes there definitely reminded me of something that I experienced in my analog mission, and there's a lot more too that a lot of different scenarios that don't show, but the dynamics are very real, and the stress that's involved to the entire crew is very real, and there's no way to stop that. There are ways to mitigate that, reduce that, perhaps even anticipate that, but you can't eliminate it altogether. And so, very interesting show, and I really enjoy the fact that it was able to air and show the people that it's not just the delta V or the fuel required. It's not just the propulsion power or the vessel itself. or the size. I mean, it's going to be tiny. We already know that. But the human element is a massive thing that we really need to focus on. And the human research program at NASA focuses just on that.
By the way, how many were you when you were on the analog mission in the crew?
So our analog mission, HERA, Human Exploration Research Analog, was 4 crew members. And that was at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. I believe it's always been 4 crew members. That's the number that they're sticking with. And a lot of research is going into that. So changing that number may influence the research. And it was tiny.
That's one of the reasons why I was asking. I listened to a show 2 or 3 days ago on the Mars Society conference, and one of the researchers said that 3 is a mess because there's always someone left out. And the composition between genders is the same, matters very much. If you have equal numbers or unequal numbers. So that's why I was asking how many you were. Would you be okay to share some of your stories from the analog mission, and especially related to the crew and the people, the dynamics?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Let's see, how did we get started? We were selected from a pool of applicants, and we were introduced to each other via email. And so we then went on Zoom or Skype, I'm not sure what platform we used, to kind of chat and see what we look like. And hey, we're going to be living together for a while, very closely. So we began some dialogue, and one of the first things that we needed to work on was just a simple task, basically working on our patch and learn. And I don't know if you can see it, but that's our patch there. And coming together and working on that. And so we did that. And then we went to Houston. We had people all over the country here in the US, from the West Coast and the East Coast, that met in Houston. And we started trying to build rapport as quickly as possible. So we tried to do a lot of things together. And I think that was definitely key in us getting along during the mission. So we had 2 weeks of training. And training was we're all competitive people. And that's what NASA seems to pick. Maybe only competitive people want to lock themselves up in an analog mission. Who knows? But we got to learn about that. We got to learn about the different tasks and experiments, how to conduct them correctly, how to complete certain tasks correctly. And I'm not going to lie, there was a lot of information that we were trying to absorb in such a short amount of time. And in the meantime, the timer is counting down. And so, soon you're going to be in there for 45 days, which is the length of the mission, not be able to see your loved ones, not be able to take care of work matters, for example, family, private matters, personal matters. And so we got to know each other. And then day one, we looked at the door, the hatch, and it was locked. And so it begins.
Were you able to communicate with the family? Yes, I guess I imagine email and video conferencing, that was possible, right?
Oh my gosh. No, I wish we had video conference or email. No, we were able to get on the loop and just talk on the phone for 30 minutes once a week. And that was pretty difficult. I believe on the ISS, astronauts get to speak to family every day for half an hour and an hour, depending on what's happening. So that was tough for us because so much happens in that week, it feels like. And what we started to do is write notes. Okay, I want to talk about this. I want to share this experience, this thing that, a funny thing happened. And so I want to definitely discuss that. And then all the questions you have for your loved one or your family or your friends. But it built resilience, and things like that really made the mission feel real. I mean, we always knew we were in a simulation, but we are confined. We can't talk to our family whenever we wanted to. We have to follow a very strict schedule. You can't take a nap whenever you want to. You can't go out for a walk. You don't see the blue sky. You can't do whatever you want to do. You have to follow a specific routine. And that definitely made it feel real. And it's very quick that you would feel that you are traveling in space, that this mission is a real mission. And I feel like that's what the investigators wanted, because the more you believe that you're in a mission, the better the science becomes.
So did you feel that right away when the hatch was closed?
It took a little while to get there. I think it took a few days before I would catch myself like, wow, I haven't thought about this being a simulation in 3 hours. And then, a few days later, it's 8 hours. You kind of forget that, and you're just doing tasks. You're just working. You're doing the science. You're doing the experiments and the research, and you're communicating. And that just made it feel like a real spaceship in space, and how awesome that was.
We experienced a bit of confinement and isolation now in this past year, but I always thought that it's nothing compared with what astronauts would feel when they go on a journey to Mars. But you can compare that better than I do. Is it similar? How does it feel compared to what we went through this year?
There are definitely similarities. Yulia, the main difference is, I'm assuming you have windows next to you. I think I see a window behind you. Yes, we get to see our sky. We get fresh air. You get to walk around and do that, where astronauts on their way to Mars won't be able to do any of that. So that is one major difference. Plus, there's we are experiencing fear. People are scared with this pandemic. What does it mean? Is there going to be a vaccine? It took us several months to understand how you can transmit the virus from one person to the next. And there's still questions unanswered. So there's fear there. Obviously, you'd be experiencing fear as an astronaut on your way to Mars, because there's a thin wall that's protecting you from the laws of thermodynamics, from pressure, radiation, and microgravity, and so on. Different kind of fears, but they're still there. Some of the similarities would look at, you don't have the freedom that you're used to. You're confined with a group of people, and you don't always get to choose the group of people to be confined with. What I've learned from my experience is to make the best of the situation and appreciate the people that you're with. They are struggling too. They're going through the same difficulties as you are. And people react differently. So you've been in confinement for a while. Maybe you want to start exercising, or go out for a run, or do some, have a lot of energy and get that energy out, while somebody else wants to kind of be alone, wants it quiet, wants to maybe read by themselves. And understanding that, I think, helped a lot. One thing that I learned from my mission is to be able to step back and take a macro level viewpoint of what's happening. So you and I are in confinement. There are some arguments that are taking place, there's some frustration. But then you elevate yourself from that situation. You look from a macro level and see, these two people are in confinement. There are all these dangers, there are all these fears and unknowns are taking place. People react differently. What are we actually doing? Where are we today? And then when you come back to who you are yourself, you understand that you're just part of this dynamic game, and that you're bringing things to the table as well. So being cognizant of yourself, the group, and the situation definitely helps a lot. And then my last point is the schedule that we use is called the playbook, and astronauts use that on board the ISS. And that was a lifesaver, because it tells you exactly what you need to do at what time. And if you can honor that schedule that you've created and do the tasks and the jobs, no matter how simple or difficult they are, and take pride in those tasks that you complete, I think your situation definitely improves. So that would be my recommendation for people during this pandemic age.
Did you find anything interesting about yourself while you were confined with 3 other people that you knew but not very much?
Yes. Let's see. I feel like you kind of forget that you are part of the puzzle, and that you're mood influences people. For example, I had a hard time sleeping, especially towards the end of the mission, and I was getting 3 hours of sleep. So a day or two, and that really influences your behavior. But if that goes on to like 5 or 6 days, it can really change your mood. So you wake up in the morning, but you get out of bed in the morning, but you've been up for 5 hours. And what I learned about myself is that definitely influences what I do, and that influences the people around me. And so I became cognizant of that and started specifically, saying good morning to everybody, helping make breakfast for people. And it felt like I was going out of my way to be extra attentive to people, but maybe not. Maybe I wasn't going out of my way. It just felt that way because I was sleep deprived. Maybe that was the normal thing to do. And so that's one thing that I learned, is to always figure out a way to countermeasure whatever it is that you're experiencing. But it all starts with identifying what it is that you're experiencing and looking at your actions, looking at yourself.
I want to go back to the beginning, and then I will still stay a bit with the analog mission. What do you know the selection criteria, and how those who have selected you look at what would make a good astronaut, someone who would go to Mars?
That is $1 million question, probably worth a lot more than that. I believe NASA's got a formula that looks at the applicants. I know that we had a lot of testings done. We had a lot of testing done, physical testing and psychological testing. And that there is some criteria out there. I don't think NASA has published that. It's still being researched, but they have something I feel like is very good. We were mission 20. I think there are 21 missions that happened so far, and they were all successful. In other words, the crew completed the entire mission successfully. I think there's one mission that was cut short due to Hurricane Harvey that hit Texas pretty bad, and there was a lot of flooding. And for the safety of the people involved in the analog, they had to cut it short. But that's brilliant when you think about how many each mission had 4 crew members, and all the missions were completed successfully. So NASA's onto something very, very good, but that's not surprising.
And how much did training play, like building your team patch, meeting together in Houston and going through the training together? How much did that help to know each other a bit and build that team cohesion and actually be able to spend the 45 days together? Do you think it's essential, or do you think any team can do without?
Yes, there's definitely, it's definitely essential to kind of be able to work together, to have mutual respect to one another. I think you need to be passionate about space. I think that's the very first number one item. But to have mutual respect, we all had an engineering background. I feel like you need a STEM background in STEM to be able to apply for this specific analog mission. And we all had different interests. So some people were interested a little bit more in energy. Some people were interested in fluid mechanics, or at least that was their background. Some people were more interested in the physical, medical part of spaceflight. And then obviously, bone density and the human interaction. How do you mitigate being in confinement and being in microgravity environments? So, there are certain things that need to kind of align themselves well. What we did to strengthen the team cohesion is we all wanted to hang out together and have lunches and short walks and even work out together. I worked out with one of the crew members. We went out on runs almost every day. And that definitely built a lot of rapport and built cohesion and trust amongst each other. Now, the astronauts on board the ISS, NASA's astronauts, and I believe the cosmonauts, the Russian cosmonauts, they spend a lot of time training. I know the NASA astronauts spend about 2 years training together before they go to a mission, sometimes longer than that. And so in 2 years, you get to learn about the person at a much deeper level. You get to learn about their family, how many children do you have? What are their names? What do they do? Visits and dinners and stuff like that. And that really helps solidify the relationship, because if an anomaly takes place, and Yulia, you react differently than what I'm used to, and I've known you for 2 years, I will know that you're under pressure, and maybe I'll give you a break. You did eat my cereal, and I'm still mad about that, but I'm going to let this one slide. But if we don't know each other, I may start thinking, does she think that this is okay? Is this going to be a normal thing? And now my mind can start playing tricks on me. And so, building rapport is important.
Did you have to go through any kind of conflicts or any kind of disagreements on this 45 days mission? And what did you learn from them?
Absolutely, yes, there is conflict. It'd be great to say that we were the perfect crew and there was no conflict and everything was great. But the reality of the matter is this is a formula for conflict, and there are stressors involved. There's a reason why we only get to speak to family once a week for 30 minutes. It's not that it costs so much or the technology is not there, and that's a stressor. So there are built-in stressors in our mission that you won't find on board the ISS. Plus, and then this is a good example. There are, and there's a limitation on the things that I can share with you, because you may become an analog astronaut, and I don't want to take that experience away from you, or some of the listeners may be interested in that as well. And I want them to genuinely have that proper experience and help the scientific endeavor. But we learned that when you compile stressors that are happening at the same time, that is a formula for conflict. And you will almost always get some conflict at some level. And so let's say, you're missing your family, you're in confinement. There is an anomaly, a situation that just took place. Let's say there's a smoke alarm went off. You were snatched away from something that you were doing that required all your attention. Now you have to deal with this. You don't know how to respond to this. You're trying to communicate with mission control, but let's say communication failure takes place. And so you're adding all these unknowns and all these stressors. There's most likely going to be an eruption between the crew members. And that's something that definitely happened in our situation. We kind of ducked it the first few times during some an intersection of stressors, but eventually it definitely got us. And I was thinking about that. I'm like, wow, this is a formula, and it works. I think the important thing to think about is once that happens, how quickly can you bounce back? How quickly the crew can bounce back and say, wow, that was crazy. What did we learn from this? How can we mitigate something that happens again? That's likely to happen again. And that's what our crew did. We sat together and we were problem solvers. Let's identify what happened. Where did we fall short? Why did we feel rushed? And what can we do next time to be as efficient yet effective as possible?
So is everyone able to let go of their ego once you go through some adversity, or is that a hurdle you have to go through as well, and people have to learn how to let go of their ego? Because as you said, they are all competitive people.
Yes, that's a really good question. It's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Very highly competitive people think highly of themselves, and they've worked hard, and so at some level, they've earned some of that. But we all make mistakes. We all react to pressure differently, and there has been some problems with ego. Yeah, so one of the crew members, for example, I obviously won't name any names. We can watch Netflix during our mission, and he binge watched a very violent Netflix series. And then when he was done with 30 episodes, he watched another very similar spin-off of that, another 20 episodes. And I guarantee you that influenced his personality, because you're in confinement. Your stimuli is very, very limited. And so if you're looking at people building architectures, people pioneering the uncharted land, or scuba diving and working together and all of that's going to influence you a certain way. If you're watching people killing other people and being violent, that's going to influence you as well. So, and that's actually something that, MOSAIC ATM, the company I work for, is trying to mitigate right now. We're working on technology to kind of mitigate that, which I'll touch on later on. But back to the story, that definitely had an influence with respect to time, and it just became harsher and harsher and harsher. And I believe everybody recognized that. So how do you mitigate that? Well, there are some countermeasures that NASA has identified, that some of the principal investigators that do different experiments on campaigns and missions figured out. Some of them may include having group activities where we sit together and share personal things about each other. And there's a way to do that, where people, and every time we would do something like that, it felt like the reset button was pushed, which is brilliant. I mean, humans are by no means perfect. And so it's interesting to see that a simple exercise like that doesn't include drugs or anything drastic, can reset everybody and remind us of how difficult the situation is, and how we should be cognizant of ourselves and aware of other people's feelings or behavior.
But it's also fascinating because there's been a lot of talk if do movies really influence us, or do computer games really influence us. But from what you're saying, it feels like yes, they do, and especially if other stressors, you're facing other stressors, this is even more powerful.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, last time we were talking about what you were working on MOSAIC, and you just started to mention that. Are you still working on the health sensors?
Yes, we are working on introducing artificial intelligence to the crewed mission. So in a 4 crewed mission, AI would be, in a way, number 5. Some people think of it that way. I mainly think about it as it's there to assist the crew and monitor the crew as a helper. And so if, like we were able to kind of, I think everybody can predict conflict, that conflict is going to happen, because Yulia always eats my cereal in the morning. She eats her cereal and then eats my cereal. And I come back from the restroom and, there's a big portion of my cereal gone. And so maybe that doesn't affect me. I find it funny, but eventually maybe it will get to me. And so I could predict that it's going to happen, and perhaps other people can do the same. Well, can we create some algorithms that sense these kind of things to be able to bring in predictive analytics to say, hey, if this situation, whatever it is, doesn't change soon, isn't mitigated somehow, I predict that there's going to be a conflict on next Tuesday. And this is a very simple, obviously, explanation of it. It is so complicated, and it's very, very difficult to build. But MOSAIC ATM decided, you know what, this is necessary. This is something we want to do. So we're investing in it, and we got to begin somewhere. But the main thing is communication delay. If you and I are orbiting Mars, MCC is 22 minutes away from us each way in communication. So having a in-depth communication can be very difficult. And we wouldn't be speaking the way you and I are speaking, obviously. We would write everything down, just like, our 30-minute call once a week, so we don't miss anything, and all the different scenarios and so on and so forth. So having something autonomous that can work with the crew on board to help mitigate the isolation, confinement, and extreme situation that we were in, I think has a lot of value to it. In addition, the newest part to that is to bring in virtual reality to help the crew with positive stimuli. Because of the lack of stimuli, some investigations have shown a reduction in brain mass, spatial cognitive decrease, and other things as well. So can we, through virtual reality, be able to maintain what the astronauts have? Now, they're going to be in the best shape when they leave here. But what about 6 months into it, a few weeks before they land? on Mars, are they going to be able to perform as well as we expect them to? Can we train them through the 6-month period? What if the landing site changes? What if an anomaly happens and now this is not what they trained for? Can virtual reality help them with that? Can virtual reality show you the blue sky and the ocean in confinement? I would like to share a story with you. So during the virtual reality experience, sometimes there would be a glitch and the VR would need to be reset. And so during it being reset, during the task that we had to do, we got a few seconds, maybe a few minutes of this beautiful landscape that looked like you're in the Swiss Alps, looking at beautiful trees. You could almost see the wind and wind's influence on the seascape and the mountain peaks, and it was wonderful. It was just a simple desktop of the environment that they were reloading, but it opened up this entire world and put such a great smile on my face. And so, looking at this from a scientific point of view, can something like this influence me to make my cognitive skills in the way when I left the planet? Can they increase, perhaps, or can it slow down the decrease rate, the rate of decrease? So that's something that we're investigating. But artificial intelligence is the way to go when it comes to deep exploration missions. There's just no way around it. You cannot speed up communication. You cannot go faster than the speed of light. And so you need something autonomous there with you that knows how to react, and can hopefully estimate how you're feeling and give you countermeasures to help mitigate those feelings.
Are these more psychological measures and preventive measures, or are you going to look into the whole human body? Like, I don't know, the temperature is increasing, there might be an infection, so you're checking something different, is it just now psychologically?
Yeah, really good question. That's ultimately the goal. We need to develop something that can do this holistically. And look at all the different scenarios, understand the propulsion and the mechanics of the spacecraft, and be able to take all that into consideration as it weighs in the different countermeasures that it's going to give you. So if it's going to change your schedule because of whatever conflict is happening, or you're just, whatever it is that going to influence the safety of the other crew members? Is that going to influence the experiments that are taking place? Now, remember, you're in a tiny little place. And so if you're occupying a space, it's difficult for someone else to do any work there. And so, a lot of questions to be answered. Again, very, very difficult thing to do, extremely difficult. But we got to get started somehow. And so,
for sure. And I do believe that the mind is most probably the most important thing. If that works properly, then the rest somehow tends to work as well.
Yeah, the mind is very, very important and very difficult to heal and maintain, for sure.
Have you seen, you're really working to build something that hasn't been there before, but I'm sure that some of the research that you are doing to get people into space is also being used on Earth, right? And have you seen any of the technologies being put to use here and making our current planet a better place?
Yeah. So technology that has been discovered in microgravity. Yeah. So medicine is smashing it with a new advancement from microgravity to terrestrial use. I believe there's been some advancement in valves as well for fluid mechanics. The main thing that I like to tell people is the ISS is such a jewel for us, for humankind, because we've removed the vector of gravity from our equations. And so, gravity is such a large, harsh force. Now, once you strip that away from whatever experiment that you're doing, all these tiny little forces start making some noise. You can start seeing them and studying them. Now, here terrestrially, they exist. They're very weak because they can't compete. But once we understand that, it's becomes a more fundamental understanding of whatever it is. I mean, boiling water in space is, an amazing thing to see. So if you Google, water being boiled in space, you should check it out. It's very, very interesting. And it just reminds us that we don't really know exactly how that process happens, believe it or not. We don't understand the process fully, but it is very interesting. And so bone structure, for example, I've developed this prototype several years back regarding mitigating bone loss in a microgravity environment. Our body is very, very smart. It knows something is different and is a very efficient mechanism. And so it's not going to continue depositing new bone in our body because we don't need it in microgravity. Smart body, but in this situation, maybe a little too smart. We don't want that. We want it to continue bone mass. And so how do you mitigate that? And so my research looked at how do you build a small machine that can fit in a capsule if you needed to, that can help slow down osteoporosis in space, disuse osteoporosis as it's called, slow it down or stop it. Now, stopping it is a little difficult to do. So let's start with understanding how to slow it down. And how do you use sensors to learn about how Yulia works out? Is it changing with respect to time because her muscles are getting weaker, because her bones are getting weaker? Is there a way to correct that and remind her, hey, you're not stretching all the way out or the right way, or you might injure yourself if you go beyond a certain axis. So these are the things that I looked at. But anything that I do, I always think about the terrestrial application because it's such a beautiful relationship to be able to scientifically discover things in space and bring them back to Earth to help people here. Osteoporosis here with the older adult is a very big problem. And genetics plays a big part of it, as we know. But besides genetics, is there an area where we can control it? Well, we already know that lifestyle has something to say. If you smoke, you're most likely going to have weaker bones. If you exercise, you're probably going to have stronger bones. But what else is out there? And so, this is a good example on how research on board the ISS and microgravity can help people here on Earth.
And do you get, I'm kind of curious, do you get companies coming and asking you what else you've researched and how they can use it? Or are there conferences in which you can share so the others can say, oh, this is something that we can use on Earth? Because you are really focused on space travel, so, and MOSAIC as well, and everything that you do. So how does this collaboration work?
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, MOSAIC is a small company of pretty passionate people, and they like to push the boundary. So I fit right in there. So we're always trying to meet people and bring in people that also are zealous about space exploration. And it's really easy to do that if you believe in what you're working on. People can see that. So space has been hitting the news lately, so we're seeing a lot of people interested in it. The conferences definitely help with networking. And it's very difficult to do this by yourself, like I mentioned. So finding partners that also want to help with building virtual reality in space to mitigate certain aspects becomes very, very important. And collaboration is definitely key. I think this last year, because of the pandemic, one good thing that happened is, all these conferences at just the click of a button, and you're communicating with people worldwide that share the passion that you are. So it's very easy to find now and bring them along.
Talking about that, how do you think we can make this even more visible? Because if you ask me, it's still a small niche of people that are attending these conferences, even if they are free and they are online and they are free. I mean, the last one had about 9,000 people, the Mars Society conference, which just took place last week. And if you ask me, that's very small. It's a very small number, right? I think when the two astronauts went with the SpaceX shuttle to the ISS like a month and something ago, the number was around there as well. So how can we bring the subject of space travel and the excitement of being a multiplanetary species and all of us contributing and having this common goal into the lives of more people.
Yeah, I think we need to do that on an individual basis. I advocate anybody that is passionate about space, especially if you're an older adult, to volunteer some of your time with the younger adults. It's so gratifying to do that. And I think that's how I contribute, how I build excitement, is anybody that wants to listen, I talk to them about, space, talk to them about what I know and tell them the unknowns, which is an awesome conversation. There is so much that we don't know. But with the younger adults, getting them to understand that, yeah, space is difficult. It's a little scary too, and it's hard, but that doesn't mean you cannot be part of it. You can't be part of the solution. It's very, very important. And you almost immediately see the reward. So yes, if you're listening to this and you happen to be in a position where you know physics or propulsion or whatever it is, volunteer some of your time with the younger adults, spend some time with them, talk to them about what you know, and have them understand that, this stuff is hard to study. STEM is difficult, for example, but it's only difficult, because it's, you need to spend time to be able to, you need to pay your dues. Nobody's just born that knows math and physics. You got to spend time doing it, and it becomes less difficult with respect to time. But if you're passionate about art, which is I obviously am, and you want to contribute and you want to be part of that, there's definitely an arena now that exists for the arts, you see this word STEAM that's around there. So definitely, research what's out there. A lot of the planets that we can't see that we know are there are being painted by artists. So there's an area there where you can contribute, because sometimes it's good to see the visual. Now, one thing that I see a lot, and this is, whenever I'm speaking to young adults, I explain to them that you see some pictures that are very fancy with beautiful orange skies, with purple stars and planets that have all sorts of colors on them. And that's just not real. It's not true. It's very stylized, and that's okay in a way, but I like to bring reality onto the table and tell them space is dark, space is cold, but that's not bad. That's still cool. That's still a lot of fun and very exciting and very interesting.
Do you see? I know you do talks at universities as well. Do you see their eyes light up when you talk about space? Students, professors alike.
Yes, absolutely. Space is just fun. I haven't met anybody that thinks space is boring. I hope I never do.
Me too.
Yeah.
One more question, Mounir, because you were talking about things that we are missing, blind spots that maybe we didn't see before. What keeps you up at night when you think about space travel? What is the most difficult part to achieve in your point of view?
That's a really good question. What scares me is that conflict amongst nation happens that slows down space exploration. That would be such a sad thing. We're making such great progress, but in a way, a lot of this progress could have happened 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And, politics do play a big role. I think space is showing us that we can unite as a people and explore together. You've got small nations that are joining the space race. Bring them on board. Let's discuss this. How do we do this? You focus on this tool. We'll focus on this tool, and we'll build something massive together that represents all of us. And there are no country lines in space. It's just open, and we are one. So space brings such beauty in bringing that diversity and representing humankind. So that's something that worries me, are things that may shake that up or slow the progress of that. So I hope that, space gets pulled to the side from all the other political things, which is very difficult because they're intertwined, but I really hope that we continue doing this. And specifically, one of the things, if I am to go in a little more specifics, one thing that scares me about space is the human element. We're not meant to be there. We're meant for our gravity here. For thousands of years, we've adapted to Earth. And so going out there has a lot of dangers when it comes to thermodynamics, when it comes to so many pressure. But the human element within amongst each other on a trip to Mars, for example, on a trip to Mars is going to be difficult. How are we going to react? Am I going to be able to function the way I wanted to function, the way I was trained once I land to Mars? Am I going to fracture a bone because I've lost 15% of my bone mass? Am I going to be forgetful of where I am? My processing speed, and that's the critical moment. Once you get there, you are so far away from Earth. You can't just turn around and come back because the planets are no longer aligned. So you need to spend your 500 days or whatever amount of days there living and surviving and hopefully thriving and making good science before you can come back. So that's a very scary part because we haven't experienced anything like it before. And analog missions help us, scratch the surface a little bit and understand what would it be like? What can we predict? What can we learn? What kind of countermeasures work? And how do we utilize those? So I'm an advocate for analog missions and space science. So
I agree with what you say about politics, but I also hope that because each country has different skill sets, we can learn how to complement each other and work together like we work on the ISS. And that seems to work just fine.
I love it. I love that we have people from all different places and countries and culture working together because it's a good reminder of being very specific and being very clear with your communication because the other person you're talking to is from a different background. And so it makes communication clear. And the end result of that is a better, more successful mission because you're not assuming that the other person understands your background or this or that or the other. So we're being very clear, very specific, very respectful of one another. And all that equates to a more successful mission.
Mounir, thank you so much for today. Anything that you wanted to say that maybe I didn't ask?
Support space exploration and, pay attention to the youth of our people. Let's give them the tools to understand space and understand the what it takes to get there and support them. That's probably the number one thing I want to leave this conversation with.
We need them for sure. Thank you so much, Mounir, and thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Yulia, for having me.